If you only checked the results page on the opening weekend of the 2026 World Cup, you'd think everything was proceeding exactly as expected. A handful of low-scoring draws and a few narrow, grinding victories. But relying solely on that final scoreboard creates an illusion of routine. It masks the chaos happening on the pitch. To actually understand the historic anomalies, the broken curses, and the shifting global hierarchy of this tournament, we have to zoom past the final whistle. This opening weekend proves that final scores are liars. The real truth of 2026 is buried deep inside the micro-statistics. Take Brazil's 1-1 draw against Morocco. On the surface, it looks like a heavy favorite stumbling against an underdog. Yet that single point preserved an astonishing historical streak. This timeline charts Brazil's unbroken 21-game streak in World Cup openers, dating back to 1934. But since 1994, they've won exactly one single match out of 9 against top 7 FIFA-ranked teams. Vinícius Jr.'s offensive output remains a bright spot. 4 of his 10 international goals have come under Carlo Ancelotti. But despite his 11 games of brilliance, the overall squad remains highly vulnerable against elite opposition. We see a similar deception in Switzerland's 1-1 draw against Qatar. The final score betrays a game of suffocating statistical dominance. This scatter chart maps the Swiss attack. They fired at the Qatari goal 22 times. That is the highest volume of attempts Switzerland has recorded in a World Cup match since records began in 1966. And yet, all of that offensive pressure was completely neutralized in the 94th minute. An agonizingly late own goal by Miro Muheim wiped out the Swiss lead and handed Qatar their first ever World Cup point. For these footballing giants, sheer volume of attacks and historical safety nets are no longer enough to guarantee an easy victory. Scotland and Haiti abandoned fluid football for a 90-minute battle of pure physical attrition. The officials whistled 44 combined fouls over the 90 minutes. That is the highest group stage total since Chile and Switzerland battered each other back in 2010. But beyond the bruising gameplay, that single goal shattered a massive curse for the Scottish squad. Looking at this timeline, John McGinn's strike marks Scotland's first goal at a World Cup in 28 years, finally closing a barren stretch that began right after Craig Burley scored against Norway in 1998. At over 31 years old, McGinn also wrote his name into the record books as the oldest Scottish goalscorer in the tournament's history. And most importantly, that grueling performance secured Scotland their first actual World Cup victory since 1990. For Scotland, the ugly microstats of those 44 fouls were a necessary price to pay to erase 36 years of historical trauma. Meanwhile, Australia's historic 2-0 victory against Turkey stands as a masterpiece of statistical defiance. This radar chart visualizes a staggering imbalance. Turkey unleashed 28 shots without scoring, the tournament's highest volume of attempts so far. That extreme inefficiency was forced directly by Australian goalkeeper Patrick Beach, who constructed a wall with 8 saves. That unrelenting defensive wall created the platform Australia needed for an offensive breakthrough on the other end of the pitch. 20-year-old Nestori Irinkunda capitalized on that foundation, becoming the youngest player to score in the tournament for an Asian Football Confederation team. Australia's win proves that in a modern game, surgical youthful precision and extreme defensive resilience can completely neutralize an overwhelming attacking volume. When we step back from these micro-statistics, a clear macro-narrative for the 2026 World Cup begins to emerge. The data clearly proves the historical gap between traditional footballing royalty and the rest of the world is rapidly closing. Decades of national trauma are being erased. Established giants are struggling to break down lower-ranked teams. Unprecedented youth are claiming records previously held by veterans. In 2026, the data rigorously quantifies every